Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we're going to do a bit more of a process-oriented session. Um, when I'll just say that at Buddy INS, we've been working completely entrenched in the group space for a few years now, and we really have had to develop and refine our own process for working with groups. We really didn't have much of a model to go off of. We really had to learn from, a number of different people that we've been involved with over the years, be it carrier partners, kind of teaching us the process of how to work with them, or broker partners who have been in group benefits for decades, where we've learned some tips and tricks and really just kind of our own findings, right? Failing and succeeding forward and taking what we learn from that. And we've built out a bit of a process. And in the buddy system, we actually have resources that are designed to kind of show you the process from start to finish. Not exactly light bedtime reading, but something where you can really understand from where you are in the group process, understand what's already taken place, what needs to take place moving forward. So, we're hoping today to give you a bit of an outline of those resources, what's designed to kind of help you along the way, and give you an idea of how we define this process from really finding and getting introduced to groups all the way to enrolling a group in a long-term care plan. Again, this is something that's kind of constantly being refined, but I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. And for those of you who are in the buddy system and have buddy system access, you will want to find right up at the top here this group process button. This is going to take you to our page where we're going to basically walk you through step by step the process of a group sale. Okay. So I'll just kind of outline them one by one. Step one is obviously identifying your group opportunities, right? We have a few FAQs here that are designed to kind of get your gears turning on what makes an ideal group, how to get introduced to groups, how to start the conversation, things of that nature. Moving on from that, once you've kind of identified your prospect or have been introduced to your prospect, step two is the pre-sale. So there are a couple of things you want to come away from this stage with. So in the pre-sale stage, this is kind of before we're actually giving any sort of formal quotes. We really want to focus on the goals of number one, coming away with the census for a group. If we don't have one yet, that's kind of like the skin in the game or ultimate initial show of interest. I'm willing to give you my data to go and provide me quotes and go and try to get a formal proposal for group long-term care. So that's one of the big goals. Um, the other goal here is, especially if you already have a census in hand, really getting the group acquainted with group long-term care offerings, understand their why for discussing group long-term care, and get them comfortable with the kind of predominant plan designs and just the way the product and process works. So allowing them to feel comfortable and settled in with what options you'll really be looking at and coming away with the census are our ultimate goals there. Step three is the proposal process. This is essentially going to start once we have a census in hand, once the group is kind of letting us know that they are ready to move forward and get formal proposals. And in this process, we're doing a couple of things depending on what type of case we have in front of us. So there are employer funded cases and there are full voluntary cases. So For employer-funded cases, we can generally provide quotes that the carrier doesn't have the ability to provide. And that's really the employer-funded summary. So from the census data, using the census quote tool, we can actually take that census data and give the employer an idea of how much it would cost to fund a plan for some or all of their employees. I say some if there's a case of a carve out with voluntary for the rest of the employees. That'd be a case where we just do it for some employees, but we can show the aggregated cost for all employees. And that's generally for employer funded cases to give the group an idea of what those costs may be to provide a plan to employees. Really shows them the flexibility of the amount of funding as well. Of course, we lay out the concept of employer funding during the pre-sale to get an idea if we have an employer funded case in front of us. But even for all cases, whether employer funded or voluntary, this is the stage where we're actually pursuing a formal proposal from all of our carrier partners for the group, right? And this is where the carrier is essentially underwriting this group and providing a formal proposal. And I think that's kind of the meat and potatoes of this stage. But there's also a piece of this stage that comes when we get the proposals back, right? Proposals are not necessarily something that makes sense to just stick in front of the group and ask, does all this look good? I think there are many pages in these proposals that are generally too much to dig into. And of course, there's pricing tables for the group at each of the benefit levels that could be offered that come in the proposal. That can be a lot to look through. So, as part of this stage, what we really want to do is summarize the options that we have and summarize the proposals that we've gotten. And you could be in a case where, say, you have a group of 500, 1,000, 5,000 employees. You could be in a scenario where you're being offered 6 products between 4 carriers. And it can provide a little bit of paralysis to a group if you try to show them every single one of the options. I think it's important to show a couple of finalists. I think it's important to share why these carriers are finalists. And hopefully, a lot of the work you've done in the pre-sale will really help you get an idea of what the group's preferences are. Are they looking at affordability? Maybe our finalists are term life options. Did you present, for example, a whole life option, say with the standard that has guarantees all the way through age 121 on benefits and premiums? Do they gravitate toward that more? Maybe we make sure to include that as a finalist. Anything with inflation protection, that was a big priority, or, you showed different inflation protection options, which are continuing to enter the market more and more. Maybe you make those the finalists, but understanding how to narrow down the number of options, explain how you actually narrowed those options down, and summarizing the proposal information into something that's super simple and easy for the group to be able to digest and helps with their decision making. Those things all make up the proposal process. So as we move into step 4, essentially moving from step 3 to 4 is a yes answer, right? The employer has given us the go ahead. Let's enroll this plan. And of course, at the end of the proposal process to kind of the beginning of this sold group process is where you're going to want to cover a number of bases. So up here, I have it actually at the end of the step three, our proposal process. But you want to do things like finalize an employer funding amount if their group is going to be funding any amount of coverage for their employees. We answer a lot of, the burning questions. What's our enrollment window going to be? What is our effective date of coverage going to be? And a lot of that revolves around when are we saying yes? When are we getting the requisite paperwork signed? Um, and how much of a runway does the team need to actually prepare? Generally, for our team, it can take us about 4 to 6 weeks to prepare, given everything that's needing to be built as part of the enrollment. So we need to create, in many cases, a customized landing page. We need to set up the enrollment platform. We actually need to build the case in the enrollment platform. We need to set up any billing in case we're doing ACH or payroll deduction. We have to make sure that payment processing and billing is set up, and a whole host of other things. There's a lot of kind of questions to answer at the beginning of the sold group stage and kind of toward the end of the proposal stage after the group has said yes. And just get the group familiar with next steps. So it's important to be able to show examples of the landing page. It's important to let the group know that we put on educational webinars and to try to schedule the dates for those webinars. A lot of these items are covered in kickoff calls, which I think are a best practice to schedule, or with implementation calls with the carriers. The carrier, in many cases, will have a representative that will help you walk through how the enrollment will be implemented, asking all of the questions that we really need to ask but don't often think about. For example, how are new hires going to be handled? Are they going to get a 30-day GI window after they're hired, or are all new hires just going to get a GI window in open enrollment every year? Um, Adjusting things like actively at work hours per week to qualify for the plan. What does a benefit eligible employee look like to you? Things like site estate, though that's settled generally much earlier on in the process. When we get a proposal, there could be some back and forth on that. And I think this is where the I's get dotted and the T's get crossed, so everybody has their proper marching orders to be able to go forward and perform their role for the enrollment. I think this step involves HR quite a bit, and really helps to answer any lingering questions that HR may have, and is designed to kind of get them feeling comfortable. But working with us as part of the sold group process, number one, is making sure that you are contracted. We try to do this up front as much as possible, but doesn't always work out that way because we're maybe between a couple of carrier options or what have you. But you need to be able to get your contracting done before the enrollment kicks off, before the group application is completely submitted in good order, and all of that good stuff. So we have links to the group contracting page within this process page where you can get contracting instructions for each of our carrier partners. This is really, if you haven't met her yet, where you're going to be introduced to Sandy Doherty, our head of operations, our absolute whiz when it comes to a lot of the contracting, a lot of the commissions, and sold group pieces in general. So Sandy is always there as a contact. If you haven't met her by this point, you will definitely meet her. She is generally very involved at this step of the process. The sold group case form is another really, really important part to this process because this is really where we are pre-filling the group application. So I'm going to show you a couple of resources that are below this, but it's really important to get that sold group form filled out as accurately as possible. There's no shame in double checking on one item or the other with the group as you're filling out the form. but it will essentially give Sandy everything she needs to pre-fill the group app for you and send it off to the requisite parties for DocuSign. Generally, if you are the broker on the case, if it's your group relationship, it'll be sent to you first to sign so that you can then pass the baton down to your group contact who's going to be signing the group app. And then generally that will be sent back to us. It's a nice, simple DocuSign process that kind of gets the signatures done in a relay. And from there, the group app will be submitted. So nice, easy process, but there are a lot of questions to answer in that process, and we're happy to walk you through some of those questions. And some of those questions can only be answered by the group contact, so we can help prep you for how to ask those questions and what each question means. So, kickoff call, we already kind of mentioned, but these are a lot of the items we generally go over. Effective dates, reviewing a marketing checklist is always really important. So, what's the sequence of communications going to be to employees? How are we going to communicate to employees? What kind of medium are we going to use? Are we going to email them? Are we going to text message them? Do you have a company intranet or internal portal that we can put these communications in, like in a bulletin section? Is it a flyer that we're going to tack up in the break room? Just understanding those communications, what the content is going to be, and when we're going to send those communications kind of in sequence to make sure everybody's kind of getting the right information at the right time as much as possible about the enrollment. uh, Review of resources we talked about, specialist consultations. They're not used on every single enrollment. Sometimes, as the broker of the group, you will be the long-term care specialist consultant or desire to be. In some cases, you may want one of the buddy long-term care specialist consultants to be available 15 minutes at a time to speak to employees. And that can be a really big lift and a really big extra element of sales support. But some generally do not require this service. Like if we're doing a fully employer funded case, for example, those setups are generally a bit different than doing, say, a full voluntary or a carve out or what have you. So there's a lot of logistics to go through, but this is the time where it's generally handled. And then choosing your commission split level for working with us as your enrollment partner. So we have generally three options. For a 50-50 split, this is full service. So we are generally taking on as much of a lift as part of the enrollment as we possibly can. So implementation with the group from start to finish, kind of having our team manage a lot of these logistics, hosting and presenting webinars, the long-term care specialist consultants. I think for your first case, and many folks do go this way for their first case, just to be able to get a look around at how the enrollment is run, obviously still being involved and playing their role, but they want us to help with as much of a lift as possible so that they can see what it looks like and really take that in and decide if this is a route they want to go going forward or if they feel self-sufficient enough after seeing it once or twice to move to one of the other options. The enrollment platform only option is an 80-20 split, you the 80, and it still does contain a lot of value that we provide as enrollment partners. So the enrollment microsite, the calculator, the email templates, webinar materials, all of the kind of prepackaged marketing support we offer, the checklist itself. But you, as the broker on the case, would generally be implementing directly with HR or the company's marketing. You'll be doing a lot of that sort of upfront work with the group on your own, more self-sufficient. So it really depends on your level of experience, I would say. We're still going to provide you a very decent lift, but it's about how confident you feel in kind of taking point on a lot of the implementation items, and really any consultations or setting up a system to be able to answer employee questions. The on-demand option is generally for the most experienced and kind of well set up partners. So for the most self-sufficient broker, you would keep 100% of premium, but you are essentially getting the most sort of stripped down value add. You would handle all of the marketing, all of the implementation. It's essentially just writing this case through us and using our enrollment platform. I would say there are many who don't ever go this route, and there are some who only go this route. It kind of depends on how you run your business, and we can always help you to understand what the fit might be there if you're not sure. So this is the sold case information form, and this is where we find out a little information about you. We find out a lot of the details about the group. So what's their legal business name, their SIC code, tax ID. We're finding out who the authorized officer is who's going to be signing the app, what's their title, who's our HR contact if we're going to be working with them on marketing, communications, implementation. We need to know who that HR lead is. This could be the same person, but oftentimes we see it as two separate people, an HR contact and a separate officer who's a bit less involved that signs the application. Product and carrier details, eligibility details, what's the waiting period for new hires, if any, um, open enrollment dates, what's our planned effective date, what's our enrollment frequency that we're trying to look at here, for the enrollment platform, how are we going to identify and tie applications to each employee, how are we going to handle the billing, what's the first payroll deduction date if we're doing payroll deduction, and how often do we deduct, and filling in any other details that Sandy needs. So in filling out this form, you are really going to give her what she needs to pre-fill the app. And again, DocuSign really puts things in a relay so it gets to all of the relevant people one after the other, keeps the chain going until eventually it finishes with us and we submit the group app. And that sets everything in stone. And then for the enrollment process, we've talked about a lot of the items we employ here. And just, I think a best practice I can give for the enrollment process is have meetings throughout the enrollment with the group, depending, excuse me, depending on the enrollment period, the enrollment window that we have. You may want to do a weekly meeting. If you have a longer enrollment window, maybe you do every couple of weeks. Whatever it may be, I think it's best to just make sure there's a call on the calendar, and it's best to have everybody show up, even if it's believed that there's nothing to discuss. I don't think we've ever had a check-in call throughout an enrollment where there's nothing to discuss. Even when people get on the call with us and say, I don't really have anything to discuss. Eventually, as you talk through things, items just come up and get addressed and continue to relieve headaches throughout the enrollment. It's also an opportunity to get a progress report on how enrollment is going so that if you need to make adjustments in real time during the enrollment, do we need to ask for an extension? Is there an enrollment platform issue where an employee's having trouble and we need to get them unstuck? Anything of that nature where we can make adjustments in real time to try to make the enrollment as successful as possible. That's when a lot of this detail is really covered. And I think it just really helps to build trust and, again, relieve headaches at the end of the day for everyone involved. Webinars, these are generally scheduled, I would say. Again, another best practice, we try to do 2 webinars per 30-day enrollment window. And I think during these meetings that happen throughout the enrollment, one of the things we generally try to do is if we're getting close to the end of the enrollment, sometimes we had one of these today, we will generally put on an office hours type of webinar, a little bit more informal, not a lot of presentation slides being exchanged, being shown off, but really a session that can be guided by employee questions. You can touch on a lot of the big hitters. You can outline some of the resources. And generally, there will be questions that come up from employees on anything and everything, finishing the application and needing advice on that, learning how to use the calculator. Um, I am going to need underwriting as part of my enrollment. What are the health questions ahead of time so I can see? Little things like that really help address anything last minute. And all of these can be recorded and put up on the landing page so people can reference from that, which I think is a super powerful thing. We've talked through consultants. We've talked a bit through microsites and enrollment landing pages. So, um, the landing pages are the heartbeat of employee education, um, indispensable as far as I'm concerned, whether we're building it for you or you have some means to make a microsite happen. I think it's essential because the content we have on here is our calculators, number one, allowing employees to quote before they go into the enrollment platform, which is generally not a very information rich calculator. You just kind of choose your benefit and get the associated premium. I think this really helps with decision making. Again, the webinars are recorded and put up on the landing page. All the LTC 101 education and bundled into a bunch of FAQs about the enrollment logistics, about the carrier, about the product, makes sure that you don't have to spend a lot of time covering those bases on things like webinars and making sure that that supports a lot of the communication that's going out around the enrollment. Scheduling link for specialist consultants, and then, of course, a link right to the enrollment platform. So, literally, just about everything an employee is going to need to understand and execute what they need during the enrollment is going to be in that landing page. And it's as simple as deploying a link in communications wherever you can, deploying a QR code on your webinar presentation to get people directly to the site. The more that people visit the enrollment landing page, the better participation is in general. Engagement, of course, precedes any participation. So all of that kind of works in sync with the communications, the webinars, anything else we may have going on, in-person events for a specific group, all work together to drive people to that landing page because everything that they need is there, including their ability to enroll. And because it's just a link to a page or a simple QR code, it can be deployed in a ton of places. Email communications, on flyers via QR code. Even if your group is working in a specific Ben admin platform like Ease, Employee Navigator, whatever it may be, that link can be deployed within there nice and easily. So I think the more people know about the pages and that information, the better enrollment results go. So I said I was going to kind of go over these at a high level, but I started to dive quite deep into these. So I'm going to take a second and just pause and see if anybody has any questions, comments, thoughts, notes on any piece of the sales process. Was anything confusing? Would you like to see a deeper dive on anything? Any comments you'd like to add from your experience working with groups? I would love to hear from you. And I also need to clear my throat because that was quite a relay of talk. So we're all big smarty pants and we know everything there is to know about the group sales process. Is that is that safe to assume?
Yes.
100%. I know you. I know you're an old pro. Gretchen, anything you want to add to what I was kind of outlining as part of like sold group process, kickoff, into, I know you touch every part of the sales process, but where you really start to, you know, your marketing materials help people to get introduced and start conversations. There are pieces we use in the pre-sale,
Right.
and all the way through, but you really start to come up front during the sold group process and
Mhm.
enrollment process. So, anything
Right.
else you want to add there? And
Right.
everybody say happy birthday to Gretchen right
It,
now.
it is my
I-
birthday.
yeah, I don't care if you don't want to contribute to the conversation, but you better say happy birthday to
Happy
Gretchen.
birthday!
Happy birthday.
Yay!
Oh, you guys are awesome. Um, well, let's see. I think, that kickoff call is really important, and it's important to have if you if you are the person who brought the business to us, it's important to have you on there, and to sort of help walk through, and we all walk through it together, what channels the group uses. We really try to take advantage of the strongest channels that they have that already exist. So that's partly what we talk about on that kickoff call, and really identifying, whether it's, I mean, a lot of times it's email, but there could be other. We have a partner right now who's texting, which is I think our first or second,
One of the first.
yeah, enrollment that takes advantage of texting, which is fantastic. So yeah, so we try to identify the strongest channels, and then we just sort of plug into those. And we have just a plethora of content. As a matter of fact, the reason I was late is because I was on a call with an association, and we're doing a second enrollment. Although technically it's a perpetual, we are
Second
carving.
push.
Yeah, it is a second push. So we're carving out, because when we looked at the data, um, there was like just no comparison to this time period last year when they were really pushing through dedicated emails, versus just kind of letting it ride, and it's in newsletters. We really need that, especially with associations, that dedicated, carved out communication, because that's where we see the best results. So we are doing another enrollment for them. So, like I said, we just we get on a call, everybody starts talking about what they think would make the biggest impact, and we just sort of plan from there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And I think, it's important to know that this stuff may it may sound easy. It is not easy in the slightest. Yes, do we have a lot of kind of pre-packaged items that we can kind of put in place, and do we have sort of template campaigns that we can adjust based on the needs of the group? Yes. I think it's a
yeah,
huge initial lift to get some of those things put together, but also the nitty gritty is where it gets most difficult. And if you're not asking the right questions, you could be headed down the wrong road, because
yeah,
you really have to make sure that not we're just sending out communications, but you have to be really sensitive as to who is
mhm,
sending out those communications,
right,
because we are a society nowadays where we are completely paranoid of phishing and
yes,
other
yeah,
sort of data security concerns. So we have to make sure that this comes from a verifiable know, like, and trust contact. If it comes from anyone else, even if it comes from you as the broker speaking to the group, um, it is just not going to get the
Yeah.
play that you think it's going to. And as a matter of fact, it's probably going to raise suspicion, which is like the ultimate enemy to enrollment engagement. It's
Yeah,
got to be, yeah,
that's a good point, Jason. And you know, and that's something else that we usually cover on that kickoff call is who's going to be the entity sending out the emails because it gets um, yeah, it can get weird if we do it because we're like a cold sender. They don't know us, so on the employer side, it's pretty much a no-brainer. It's almost always the employer.
yeah.
Um, on the association side, a lot of associations will give us their list, but I still prefer that they send it out themselves. We'll provide the copy, and they can drop it into their own email platform, and that tends to get the best delivery and the best results
I think
to
it's
be able to do.
incredibly difficult to do non-employer on your own. I personally think you're going to need a team if you're
Yeah,
working with a non-employer enrollment for essentially every step in the process from 2 to 5, right? From pre-sale to enrollment, because, like you said, some of the answers come easier for employers, right? Um, but even then, there can be some difficulty, right? Like we
yeah,
have a specific human resources email, but if you're not actually identifying that and leading with that, HR might not be thinking about email delivery as much as you should be, right? And the familiar source of information as you should be. So I think it can be something where you may select just like one person that's part of HR, have them send out communications, and it hits like, I don't know Sharon from HR, right? Or how do, you know, asking about internal metrics. There are some HR teams who actually kind of, you know, keep some of this data of how well do our emails actually hit our employees and what gets engagement and what doesn't, right? Reading between the lines there can really help. But I think a lot of those things, when it comes to sold case, when it comes to the enrollment process itself, it's important that we peel back those layers more because, number one, most of us have not seen that part of an enrollment yet, which is perfectly okay. And you will be walked through that as part of your first case. But also, there's just so much little individualized, itemized things that get covered on those meetings that we want to prepare you to ask the right questions at the end of the day. So it's important to know when those things can come up. Um,
So, could I ask a question? Can you hear
you
me?
absolutely can. What's up, Mark?
Finally figured out how to unmute.
Ahead of boy.
Hey, so this I guess would be maybe towards the pre-sale side. I've been working with some of the relationships I've had over the last year, kind of mentioning, suggesting, just off the cuff type stuff. Well, I've got one, potentially two cases that I'm it's definitely a slow process when you're dealing with bigger groups, as I've been in the
Always.
individual, not the group side. So it's like a slow lead. But I've got one that they're going to be this month presenting something to their board of directors, or at least having that conversation to potentially, frankly, get a meeting, right?
Okay.
To have me in, maybe have that discussion, not just with the individual on a board, but the rest of the people that they're meeting with. So what I'm looking is, let's say I get the yes to have the conversation. Theirs could be formal / informal. I mean, it could be at a country club from talking to the person that's one of my clients, but I also have a long-standing relationship with the company of about 12 or 13 years of doing some other business.
Okay.
So it could be kind of informal where we're just sitting in a dining hall having a drink or something versus actually sitting in a boardroom, if that makes sense, because they kind of do some of that. What is it that, I guess the starting point, like how do I present? I've never wanted to overwhelm with information, what are the few pieces maybe I would want to have with me, or bits of information I should be looking for or be able to, absolutely answer that day versus, hey, these are things we do later in the process. Like we'll answer these questions later. That's really not something I can answer now until we have, let's say, census or any other information, right? Because you don't want to
Yeah,
throw everything on the table and then everything's confused. So
super good question.
how do I process after, say, a yes for, in a sense, just the meeting to hopefully get another yes?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's something that comes and feels a lot more natural as time goes on and you get more of these under your belt. But I would say, especially if it's going to be relatively informal, I would come into our product buddy tool, and I would actually, based on the specs of the group, I would, you know, take a look at the available options, look through them, whichever you think might provide the best sort of example or whatever you think might be a good candidate. Just remember you can say, um, this is an example of one product on the market. The products are very similar in kind of how they work at a high level, but the devil's in the details, right? Once we really dive into formal proposals, we'll get a good idea of what underwriting limits we'll actually have and what our terms are going to be from the carrier. So I like using one of the Product Buddy one pagers in just giving them a leave behind to educate them a bit on the product itself. But when it comes to the conversation, I think, a lot of folks, especially if they're individual long-term care specialists going into a group conversation, they tend to all of a sudden get intimidated and forget they're a long-term care professional and forget to kind of go over the most important items. Because I'll tell you, I did this in the beginning of working with groups and I really had to refine my approach. Um, I would just go straight into like group talk. I think I'd just get this idea in my mind if that's what they want to hear. But I think the things that have resonated the most since I've changed my approach is, I always start with introducing myself, introducing Buddy INS, and saying the reason we do this is that there's 50 million unpaid family caregivers plus out there who are putting their life on hold in some way, shape, or form to take care of a loved one. And we, through group and individual long-term care, are trying to reduce that number as much as we can for future generations. And that really can resonate with folks. And I think the other thing that really resonates and gives us kind of a pushing off point for our conversation is asking, you know, um, in the workplace for you all, or even in your own personal lives, have you had any um, personal experience with long-term care? Either seeing it from an employee, seeing it from a family member, anything like that. And just listen to the one who has a story, because generally somebody is going to have a story, and that will sort of establish a why. Maybe they'll talk about a family member who was covered by long-term care insurance and it was a great experience. And that gives you a lot of momentum to work off of, because you can talk about, what their coverage may have been and how group coverage generally differs. I think in your case, you have a lot of experience in individual long-term care, right? Talking about how the group
Right.
products differ from the individual side is one of the easiest ways to start getting out some of the most important information about the plan, right? The guaranteed issue coverage, having such easy access to a product, not having to worry about being approved or denied. On the individual side, we got pages of medical questions. We've got nurses coming to our home. We've got a 4 to 6 week decision making process from the carrier, and that may end in sorry, we don't have anything for you, right?
Right.
Group being the antithesis of that, that's a great thing to highlight. talking about portability of the coverage, right? Being able to take this plan with you after you leave the employer is so huge, right? If these benefits weren't portable, of course, long-term care can happen early on in our lives because of an accident, injury, illness. But if we're playing the averages, most of us are going to use this kind of benefit after our working years. So being able to take it with you when you retire and into the years you need it most is super important and something that people generally worry about when we're talking about these types of plans. You know, talking about coverage for spouses, even at simplified underwriting or at some points guaranteed issue, is huge. That allows you to not just get the employee involved in the benefit, but another family member as well. Talking about a lot of these sort of big hitter items, you know, life and long-term care in one policy. So simple to us, right? As people who work with these products every day. But you want to give them an idea of why this plan design is really in high demand and a really good fit for a lot of groups, right? You're going to get value out of this plan as long as you purchase it and hold it because you're going to utilize it one way or another. You're going to leave behind a death benefit or you're going to use long-term care benefit. I think that's huge. The life insurance portion keeps premiums level on a guaranteed basis, right? The premium you pay today will be the premium you pay when you're age 90. I think that's a gigantically important piece to all this. So I think covering the big hitters, giving people an idea of what's out there on the market, and then for next steps, it's talking about, you know, getting a census. It's talking about, you know, if you've had employer funding as part of the conversation, so that you can get some estimates out to them. It's talking about getting the formal proposals. It's talking through what the enrollment process looks like. I think another great thing to share, you could share a link from the marketing section. If you just type in demo, you will get all of these different demo landing pages where you could essentially just pick one, send them a link to this, and this will give them an idea of how our enrollment landing pages work. I would generally do it. We have it for all products that we work with. But if you're sending a product buddy one pager on a specific plan design, send them the demo page for this and just give them an idea of, hey, look, everything is contained here. This is the heartbeat. You can enroll right from this page. There's a calculator here to walk each employee through the pricing, the benefit itself, the value of the coverage. Gives you an idea of what underwriting you'll have, right? A lot of the educational.
These would be live numbers for each product?
So these are, yes, if you are clicking on a page, for example, like this one, this is going to be based on generally an enrollment we've done before. So it's not as if it's a binding underwriting offer, but it's designed to give a product concept, and it's all based on the plan design for which the page is named. So that'll be accurate to whatever product you're looking at. And then just all the educational materials talking about educational webinars. We'll be able to educate all of your employees on a couple of webinars throughout the enrollment. All of the long-term care 101 education, you know, being able to meet with a long-term care specialist consultant 15 minutes at a time as a sort of white glove service, an opportunity for employees to ask questions they might not be comfortable, you know, asking on a webinar, or you may not be comfortable answering as, you know, the HR contact, right? I think that's super important. So it's a mix of everything, but I think it's imparting your individual experience, talking about how group really makes good on a lot of frustrating process pieces that individual can really confront people with. Obviously, while still saying that individual is generally how people are supplementing their coverage, right? It's still one of the premier ways to get long-term care. You just got to health qualify. It just highlights
Hmm.
the inclusivity of the group plan and showing people a little bit of a window inside what the product looks like, does, and what the enrollment process looks like. So long-winded, but that's kind of the main
No, that's
pieces
very helpful.
that I try to tick the
Uh,
boxes on.
so when you mentioned, looking at, say, looking at the companies and offerings that are potential from Transamerica, Chubb, et cetera, is like in this particular case, it would be a bank, more of a local bank, but fairly
Hmm.
pretty good size here
Okay.
in our state. Um,
What state?
like Kansas,
Gotcha.
likely some executive carve out in it. Is it also family owned? I mean, I know the owners and the people that started the bank
Okay.
from years ago. Um, is there maybe one or two companies that would be worth, in a sense, starting, like maybe leaning me towards out of the gate? Obviously, anything can happen once you have a conversation and their needs, what they're looking for, et cetera. But maybe as that initial example or that initial one, maybe I would start with if I'm sitting down with them and saying, hey, these are, this company's used a lot in this maybe type of scenario with an executive carve out. I would say potentially with, employer pay type
Hmm.
of an option in this, just from conversations I've had. I've had multiple conversations with this particular board member uh, uh, in some of this, not giving too much info, but he likes the idea. That's why it's being presented to the board
Yeah.
as well this month. So that might be helpful for me as being new, these products
I'm going
as
to give you
well.
kind of an express answer to this, and I would say
Mm-hmm,
this is generally going to be a matter of preference. This is um, not necessarily like you shouldn't be looking anywhere else, but I think the
right.
standards to products really help highlight the differences in plan design that we can see in group products. So, for
Mm-hmm,
example, the whole life plan looks something like this. What you'll see is generally a higher premium for a similar amount of benefit, but you have a plan because of the whole life nature of the product where benefits, premiums, everything are guaranteed all the way through your age of 121, right? And
mm-hmm,
then looking at their term to 100 plan, you can see for the same benefit, significantly cheaper on a monthly basis. But one of the things to keep
mm-hmm,
in mind is that the coverage ends at age 100. And you may very well have folks who are going to live past their age of 100. And if you get there without using any long-term care or life insurance benefit, you've got nothing left at that point, right? So I
mm-hmm.
think they are so antithetical of each other that
Right.
it really helps people understand the differences in the plan designs. Plus, there's a few other
Mm-hmm,
things I like about the standard. Um, in many cases, on the term to 100, we can add 5% inflation on the monthly benefit only. It's not going to increase your total long-term care benefit, but it'll increase your monthly access amount, which I think can be very attractive. The standard generally has full restoration of their death benefit, so that whether or not you use long-term care, you're leaving behind 100% of the death benefit that you purchase as part of the plan. Especially for the whole life, which is fully guaranteed. But if you pass away before 100 with the term product and you've used a bunch of long-term care benefit, still leaving behind 100% of that death benefit. So I
mm-hmm,
just like showing those kind of two products from the same carrier because their plan designs are so different that they highlight kind of
mm-hmm.
the range of options and it kind of sets up, all right, are you more affordability minded or are you more guarantees minded when it comes to choosing coverage?
No, that makes sense. Okay. No, that's excellent start for me on some of this stuff. That's excellent.
Awesome.
Today was
Well,
timely. This is the perfect
great.
webinar I needed today.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate you bringing up kind of a live case that you're working on, and we're always, happy to assist with anything you need as you're going through it. But that definitely helps the discussion a lot. And
Great.
we're like
Thank you.
right at the top of the hour here, so I think we're all set to wrap it. If you haven't said happy birthday to Gretchen, say happy birthday right now before I close this meeting out. Thank you all for being
Two of
here. I
my
hope you.
kids said happy birthday, Gretchen. They asked
Well,
who I was saying happy birthday to, and they said, well, can we say? And they passed it along.
well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you all being here. Hope you picked up one or two things that you can take with you for any future conversations that you have. Be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week. Have a
Bye,
good one.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.